Imagine waking one morning to a world transformed overnight. What was once familiar, the streets outside your home, the fence marking your property, the trees lining the roads, has vanished beneath a blinding, suffocating white blanket. Snow, deep and relentless, has claimed everything in sight. The roofs of neighboring homes are nearly invisible, drifts rising high against the sides of buildings. The wind screams outside, whistling and howling through every crack in the walls, rattling the windows and forcing ice-laden gusts under doors never built to withstand such force. In this world, ordinary life is suspended, paused indefinitely by the fury of nature. Families across the northeastern United States, from bustling cities to quiet rural towns, awaken to a reality where survival becomes the central focus, and even the simple act of sleeping a routine so mundane becomes an ordeal fraught with danger, discomfort, and careful strategy. The Great Blizzard, often called the Great White Hurricane, was not just a storm. It was a force of nature so powerful it reshaped communities, altered daily routines, and tested human endurance to its limits. It descended with terrifying swiftness and intensity in late winter, when the last whispers of cold still clung to the air. The conditions were extreme: gale-force winds, freezing temperatures, and continuous snowfall that piled up by the foot, then by the yard, until familiar landmarks vanished completely. In cities such as New York, Boston, and Providence, streets became impassable. Horse-drawn carriages and the new but limited electric trolleys were immobilized. Railroads, the arteries of commerce and communication, were buried under mountains of snow, leaving travelers stranded and desperate. People who had left their homes for work or errands found themselves trapped, unable to return until the snow melted or was painstakingly shoveled away. In homes across the region, the blizzard's impact was both immediate and profound. Families awoke not just to the inconvenience of snow, but to the very real threat of cold, starvation, and isolation. Most houses of the period were poorly insulated by modern standards. Many relied on a single coal or wood stove as their primary source of heat, often located in the kitchen or a central room. The stove could warm the immediate area around it, but as the wind howled outside and temperatures dropped far below freezing, other rooms remained bitterly cold. Families quickly adapted, congregating in one space and huddling together for warmth. This was not merely a matter of comfort, it was essential for survival. Parents gathered children close, layering blankets, quilts, and extra clothing to conserve heat. In some cases, rural families brought livestock indoors, both for protection from the cold and to utilize the animals' body heat. Imagine a family of 5 or 6 wrapped in layers of wool and flannel, while a dog or a few chickens share the same cramped space to provide warmth against a storm that could easily claim life if left unchecked. The experience of waking during such a blizzard was surreal. Those in urban centers often reported streets completely obliterated by snowdrifts, some reaching the second story of buildings. The wind, so strong and constant, seemed to erase the line between indoor and outdoor life. Windows rattled violently in their frames, and in some poorly constructed homes, glass panes cracked or broke entirely under the stress. Every family member had to be acutely aware of the dangers, even during sleep. A frozen draft seeping under, A door could chill the air in a room so quickly that someone would wake shivering uncontrollably. Parents often slept lightly, their ears attuned to the storm outside, ready to wake and adjust blankets, stoke the fire, or check on the children. Sleep was fragmented, punctuated by brief periods of rest rather than the long, uninterrupted slumber we take for granted today. Beyond the physical challenges, the psychological effect of waking to such a blizzard was immense. For many, it was like stepping into a dream or a nightmare. The world outside was unrecognizable. Familiar streets and landmarks vanished under mounds of snow. Neighborhoods seemed alien, silent, except for the wail of the wind and the occasional crash of a branch or roof succumbing to the weight of ice. The normal rhythm of life, going to work, sending children to school, shopping for necessities, was obliterated, leaving families isolated together in confined spaces. Social bonds were both tested and strengthened. Neighbors shared stoves, offered blankets, or dug pathways together. Within the home, the family unit became the center of all activity, the single space where warmth, light, and safety persisted against the overwhelming cold outside. Children, in particular, experienced this with a mixture of fear and wonder. For them, waking to a blizzard was like entering a vast, frozen landscape that had swallowed everything familiar. They could see only white through the windows. Familiar objects outside, fences, lampposts, carts, had disappeared. Playgrounds and streets were impassable. Many children, confined to the house, would experience the first true sense of isolation, reliant entirely on their parents for warmth, food, and comfort. Stories from the era describe kids peeking through frost-laden windows, marveling at snowdrifts higher than a grown man, or helping to shovel small paths inside the house to keep it functional. Sleeping arrangements adapted accordingly. Children would often share beds, sometimes with parents wrapped in every available layer of warmth, while adults took turns tending fires and keeping watch against the cold. Sleep became communal, a shared defense against the storm's relentless assault. Even the furniture and layout of homes dictated how people slept. Many families in the late 19th century lived in small, modest houses or apartments. Multiple generations often shared a single dwelling, making privacy almost non-existent. Beds were simple, sometimes little more than wooden frames with straw-stuffed mattresses. Wealthier households might have feather beds, but these too had limitations in extreme cold. Blankets and quilts were prized possessions, layered generously, and sometimes supplemented with furs, coats, or extra clothing. During the Great Blizzard, these everyday objects became crucial tools in the fight against hypothermia. Families slept as closely together as possible, not only for warmth but also for mutual reassurance in a time when the storm outside was an ever-present threat. The storm also forced improvisation in ways modern people rarely experience. In some cases, drifts of snow seeped under doors and through cracks in walls, forming indoor snow mounds or icy patches. Families built makeshift barriers inside rooms, piling furniture or blankets to block drafts. The placement of beds and sleeping areas was carefully considered to avoid cold spots. Some would even shovel small interior pathways to move between rooms safely. Sleeping fully clothed, including boots, was common. In some homes, stoves burned day and night, and tending these fires became part of the nightly routine. Adults would rise intermittently from bed to add coal or wood, or to shake out blankets that had become damp from condensation. Sleep was a delicate negotiation between rest and vigilance. This morning routine was nothing like what we consider ordinary today. There were no alarms, no central heating, no electric lights. Instead, there was a constant, pressing awareness of survival, a blending of wakefulness and slumber dictated by the storm. Breakfast, chores, and the day itself were postponed indefinitely. The blizzard had effectively rewritten life, and families had to adapt every element of daily living. Starting with how they slept and woke, each day became a test. How would we keep warm tonight? How would we ensure the children do not freeze? How long can we go without seeing the outside world? Waking up each day was both a triumph and a relief, a momentary victory against the harshness of nature. In this sense, the Great Blizzard was more than a historical event. It was a social experiment in human endurance. Waking to it, families experienced the raw vulnerability of life without modern conveniences. They learned quickly that survival depended on ingenuity, cooperation, and resilience. What might have been a simple morning in any other time, waking up, going about one's routine, became an epic challenge of endurance, improvisation, and adaptation. Every act of sleeping, waking, and moving within the home carried a weight of consequence unimaginable to the modern observer. And yet, despite these hardships, families endured. They found ways to share warmth, to support one another, and to persevere. Their experience offers a profound window into human resilience, creativity, and courage in the face of nature's overwhelming forces. The morning the Great Blizzard struck was unlike any other in the northeastern United States. For weeks leading up to it, the weather had been a typical late winter chill, with occasional snowfalls that communities were accustomed to handling. Streets were muddy and slippery. Children played briefly on snow-covered hills, and families went about their routines without much concern. Yet, beneath the seemingly ordinary winter sky, a storm was brewing, gathering power and intensity in ways few could have imagined. Meteorologists of the time, with limited technology compared to today, noted the development of an unusual weather pattern, a combination of Arctic air moving southward and a low-pressure system rising along the Atlantic coast. The stage was set for one of the most catastrophic storms in American history. Though the people of cities and towns alike could not foresee the chaos it would bring, as the first flakes began to fall, it seemed almost picturesque. Residents watched from their window. As the first flakes began to fall, it seemed almost picturesque. Residents watched from their windows as snow lightly dusted rooftops and tree branches. Children might have laughed and built small snowmen. Adults might have prepared the kitchen fire for warmth. Yet this initial calm was deceptive. Within hours, the snow grew heavier, transforming from delicate flakes into a relentless barrage that obscured vision and erased the familiar contours of the world outside. In New York City, the streets began to disappear under drifts, while the wind, growing stronger by the hour, howled through alleyways and down empty thoroughfares. It bent the gas lamps lining streets and sent shutters banging against windows. In Boston, Providence, and other cities across the Northeast, the same scene unfolded. The ordinary became extraordinary. Routine became survival. As the storm intensified, transportation ground to a halt. Horse-drawn carriages could barely navigate the snow-laden streets, often getting stuck or overturned in drifts taller than the horses themselves. Trains, the lifelines of commerce and communication, were paralyzed. Rail lines were buried, tracks obscured by mounds of snow, and passengers trapped in cars for hours or even days. Telegraph lines failed under the strain of ice and wind, cutting off communication between towns and cities. The isolation created by this storm was absolute. Communities that normally thrived on the movement of goods, news, and people found themselves cut off entirely. Markets went untended, businesses shuttered, and the flow of daily life was frozen as effectively as the rivers and ponds that now lay encased in ice within homes. Families faced the storm's wrath differently depending on their location and resources. In urban apartments, rooms were cold and drafty. Coal and wood stoves, the primary sources of heat, could not warm entire apartments, and the wind forced frigid air through cracks in windows and doors. Families huddled together, often in a single room, sharing blankets, coats, and the warmth of one another's bodies. In wealthier households, more fuel could be afforded. Fires were maintained continuously, and servants or family members were tasked with keeping them alive throughout the night. In poorer neighborhoods, the lack of resources meant that improvisation was necessary. Blankets were layered, children were dressed in multiple layers, and adults alternated between tending stoves and staying warm themselves. Sleep was fragmented and often fitful, punctuated by waking moments to check fires, add fuel, or ensure that children were safe and warm. In rural areas, the experience was both similar and distinct. Farmers and small-town families often lived in wooden houses or farmhouses with limited insulation. The blizzard forced some families to bring livestock indoors to conserve the animals' heat and protect them from the freezing temperatures. Fires were tended constantly, but fuel was finite, and families had to ration wood or coal carefully. Snowdrifts could accumulate against walls, sometimes entering homes through gaps or poorly sealed doors. Families improvised barriers from furniture, quilts, or sacks of grain to block the wind. Nights were long, cold, and dangerous. Children often slept close to their parents, sharing the warmth of bodies and blankets, while adults took turns ensuring that fires burned steadily and that the house remained as secure as possible. Even mundane tasks, such as fetching water or preparing food, became epic struggles against the storm, requiring careful planning and physical endurance. The storm had a profound psychological effect on those who experienced it. The transformation of familiar surroundings into an alien, frozen landscape created a sense of isolation and vulnerability. Streets that had once been bustling with activity were now empty and silent except for the constant wind. Snowdrifts buried fences, carts, and even small structures, creating a world where scale and distance were distorted. The blizzard blurred boundaries between streets, homes, and open fields, leaving families disoriented and cautious. Fear mingled with awe as people watched nature assert its power in ways they could neither control nor predict. Children, in particular, experienced a mix of terror and fascination. They were confined indoors, watching the world outside become unrecognizable, learning early the reality of survival and the strength of familial bonds in the process. The social impact of the blizzard was equally significant. Neighbors who might normally have little interaction were forced to cooperate. Communities came together to dig paths, share firewood, and care for the sick or elderly. Acts of kindness and ingenuity became common, from sharing blankets to helping dig out trapped households. Churches and local organizations, where still operational, became centers for relief, offering warmth and food to those who had lost power or were stranded. Newspapers chronicled heroic efforts and tragic losses, documenting both the challenges and the resilience of communities. Families who could communicate with relatives via telegraph often received distressing news of stranded loved ones, adding emotional strain to the already overwhelming physical challenge. Infrastructure failures compounded the difficulties. Water pipes froze, leaving homes without access to running water. Sewage systems, already rudimentary in some cities, backed up or froze entirely. Food preservation became a pressing concern, as ice boxes and cellars were insufficient to prevent spoilage under prolonged cold conditions. Those with gardens or stored crops faced shortages as transport of goods halted. Urban residents, dependent on markets for daily provisions, had to ration supplies carefully. The blizzard created both immediate and long-term challenges, testing human adaptability and forcing families to develop creative solutions to survive. Medical emergencies became particularly dangerous. Doctors and nurses had difficulty reaching patients due to blocked streets and collapsed transport systems. Illnesses that might normally be manageable became life-threatening as access to care was delayed. Hypothermia, frostbite, and exposure were constant threats. Families improvised remedies at home, using blankets, warm water, and shared body heat to mitigate the worst effects of the cold. Community knowledge and oral traditions regarding winter survival became invaluable, as families relied on each other for guidance and support. The storm also highlighted inequalities within society. Wealthier families could stockpile coal, food, and other supplies, giving them an advantage in surviving the blizzard comfortably. Poorer families faced greater risk with limited fuel, less food, and smaller, poorly insulated homes. Yet, despite these disparities, stories abound of solidarity and shared survival, with neighbors helping one another across social and economic divides. The storm became a great equalizer in some respects, forcing everyone to confront the overwhelming power of nature, regardless of wealth or status. By the end of the blizzard, cities and towns were transformed. Streets that were once familiar were buried under snow. Some neighborhoods isolated for days. Families emerged from their homes to assess the damage, clear paths, and restore a semblance of daily life. The experience left a lasting mark, shaping the way communities approached winter preparedness for years to come. Oral histories and newspaper reports document the courage, ingenuity, and resilience displayed by families during those days. The storm became a defining moment in the collective memory of the Regina benchmark against which future winters were measured. In reflection, the Great Blizzard was not merely a meteorological event. It was a transformative social experience. It reshaped the routines, habits, and daily practices of families across the Northeast. It forced people to reconsider how they lived, how they interacted with their communities, and how they survived. In the face of overwhelming natural forces, from the urban apartment dweller relying on a single stove to the rural farmer improvising barriers against drifting snow, every family was forced to adapt. Sleeping, eating, communicating, and moving all became acts of careful strategy, revealing the deep interconnection between human life and the environment. During the Great Blizzard, the concept of warmth and comfort within the home took on a new level of urgency and importance. Families awoke each day to temperatures well below freezing, while the relentless wind hammered against poorly insulated walls and windows. Central heating, as we know it today, was virtually non-existent. For the majority of families in urban apartments or small rural houses, most households relied on wood or coal-burning stoves, typically located in a single room. Often, the kitchen or parlor, which served as the nucleus of domestic life. Every other part of the house remained bitterly cold, a stark contrast to the limited warmth radiating from the stove. The result was a daily and nightly struggle to retain body heat, a challenge that profoundly shaped how families slept during this unprecedented storm. In urban apartments, rooms were often small and cramped, designed to house multiple family members within minimal square footage. Families responded to the blizzard by congregating in the warmest room, huddled together for warmth and protection. Parents and children, siblings, and sometimes even extended family members shared the same space, layering blankets and quilts wherever possible. The principle was simple: the closer together people slept, the more body heat could be conserved, turning the collective warmth of the family into a defense against the cold. Beds were often placed side by side or pushed together to maximize sleeping space, and chairs or benches might be rearranged to create makeshift bedding for overflow family members. Every decision about where and how to sleep became a matter of survival. The physical structure of homes played a critical role in these sleeping arrangements. Windows and doors were not airtight, and drafts often cut through even the thickest layers of clothing and bedding. To mitigate this, families used any means at their disposal to block the wind. Heavy curtains, quilts, or even coats were draped over windows, while doorways were blocked with furniture, sacks of grain, or additional bedding. Some families built temporary barriers along the floor to prevent cold air from sweeping under doors. These strategies were essential, as the blizzard's wind could chill a room in minutes, turning even a small space into a freezing chamber. The constant attention to drafts and cold spots shaped not only sleeping arrangements but the daily rhythm of life, with adults periodically checking rooms, adjusting blankets, and ensuring that the fire continued to burn. The types of bedding available during the period also influenced how families coped with the storm. Beds were simple, often wooden frames supporting straw-stuffed mattresses, or, in wealthier households, feather beds. Layering was critical. Families would pile multiple quilts, blankets, and even extra clothing on top of each other, creating a layered thermal barrier against the freezing air. In some cases, beds were shared not just for warmth, but also as a practical solution to limited space. Children often slept with parents, huddled together in shared beds to maintain body heat. Adults alternated roles, sometimes staying awake to tend fires or add coal, while others rested, ensuring that warmth was continuous throughout the night. The act of sleeping became an orchestrated process, a balance between rest and vigilance. In rural homes, sleeping arrangements were often adapted to include animals, another source of warmth. Livestock, dogs, cats, and sometimes even goats or chickens were occasionally brought indoors, particularly in smaller farmhouses where stoves could not heat the entire space effectively. The presence of animals provided not only warmth but also a degree of comfort and companionship in otherwise harsh conditions. Family members positioned themselves around the animals, using their collective body heat to supplement the warmth of blankets and stoves. This practice, though unusual by modern standards, was a practical response to extreme cold, illustrating the lengths to which families went to survive the blizzard. Clothing also became an integral part of sleeping arrangements. Families often slept fully clothed, layering woolen garments, flannel nightshirts, and even boots to conserve heat. Hats and scarves were sometimes kept on indoors, particularly for children, to prevent heat loss from the head. Every piece of clothing served a function, contributing to a delicate balance that allowed families to survive through long, bitter nights. In the coldest homes, it was not uncommon for adults to remain partially awake, shifting positions to prevent hypothermia and ensuring that children remained warm. Sleep was intermittent, often broken by the need to stoke fires or adjust blankets, turning the night into a series of brief, restorative periods rather than a long, uninterrupted rest. The social dynamics of shared sleeping arrangements also shaped the family experience. The close proximity required during these nights fostered cooperation, intimacy, and mutual support. Parents took turns monitoring fires, attending to children, and managing limited resources such as blankets and fuel. Older siblings might watch over younger ones, ensuring they remained bundled and safe, while couples might arrange themselves strategically to share warmth most efficiently. These arrangements reinforced family bonds, creating a shared sense of purpose and resilience in the face of extreme adversity. Sleeping became not just a physiological necessity, but a communal effort, a collaboration between family members to endure conditions that would otherwise be intolerable. Nighttime challenges went beyond mere cold. Snowdrifts sometimes seeped under doors or through windows, forming icy patches or even small snow mounds inside homes. Families improvised constantly, adjusting bedding and furniture to create pathways and barriers. Kitchens became centers of activity at night, as stoves required constant tending and water had to be fetched or melted from ice. Adults often slept lightly, attuned to every creak of the house or gust of wind outside, ready to rise and respond to threats to warmth or safety. Children, meanwhile, learned to adapt to these irregular conditions, sleeping in bursts and waking to the sounds and rhythms of the household's nocturnal vigilance. The experience instilled early lessons in resilience and adaptability, shaping perceptions of winter, family, and survival that would last a lifetime. Economic and social factors also influenced sleeping arrangements. Wealthier families had the advantage of larger homes, multiple stoves, and more abundant bedding, allowing for somewhat more comfortable nights. Poorer families in contrast, had to improvise with what they had. Simple wooden frames might be used for multiple beds. Quilts and blankets were reused and layered creatively, and even clothing was repurposed to provide extra warmth. These disparities highlight the intersection of social status and survival during extreme weather events. Yet across all classes, the underlying principles remained the same. Huddle together, conserve heat, and remain vigilant. Human ingenuity and cooperation became the tools through which families overcame the formidable challenges of the blizzard. The blizzard also altered routines within the household. Daily schedules were suspended, and activities were reorganized around the availability of warmth and safety. Meals, chores, and even social interactions were dictated by the need to maintain heat. Families scheduled tasks, strategically taking advantage of daylight when possible, but always prioritizing the maintenance of warmth through shared sleeping arrangements, fires, and careful management of bedding and clothing. Children's education, work responsibilities, and social engagements were put on hold, reinforcing the idea that survival had become the central focus of life during this extraordinary period. Sleep itself during these nights became a study in contrast. On one hand, it was desperately sought after, as exhaustion from the day's struggles, shoveling snow, tending fires, fetching water, took its toll. On the other hand, sleep was fraught with risk. Exposure to cold, the potential for hypothermia, and the need to maintain fires created an environment where rest could never be entirely complete. Families adapted by adopting short, restorative bouts of sleep, interspersed with wakeful periods of monitoring and care. The concept of a long, uninterrupted night's sleep was a luxury few could afford during the Great Blizzard. Psychologically, these shared sleeping arrangements fostered both stress and resilience. The constant awareness of danger, combined with physical discomfort, created a heightened state of alertness. Families had to be ready to respond to sudden changes in temperature, draft infiltration, or stove failures. Yet, within these challenges, there was also a remarkable sense of solidarity and purpose. Children learned the importance of cooperation and trust. Parents exercised ingenuity and problem-solving, and households as a whole developed a rhythm of life that balanced risk with survival. These nights were formative, leaving lasting impressions on those who experienced them and shaping cultural memory of winter storms for generations. In summary, the nights of the Great Blizzard were defined by shared warmth, strategic improvisation, and family cooperation. From urban apartments to rural farmhouses, sleeping arrangements were dictated by the need to conserve heat, protect children, and maintain vigilance. Bedding, clothing, and even animals played a crucial role in survival, while social and economic factors shaped the level of comfort and safety available to each household. Sleep became a communal effort, an intricate balance between rest and survival, and a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of families facing one of the most severe winter storms in American history. Through these experiences, the blizzard left an indelible mark on the collective memory of communities, highlighting the intimate relationship between human life, environmental challenges, and the enduring power of family bonds. During the Great Blizzard, the struggle to maintain warmth inside the home became a central aspect of daily life. fanned. Nowhere was this more apparent than in the way families managed their bedding, clothing, and the occasional presence of animals indoors. In an era before central heating and modern insulation, the home itself was a fragile barrier against the storm. Fires from wood or coal stoves provided some relief, but they were concentrated in a single room, leaving the rest of the household bitterly cold. Consequently, families had to develop a meticulous system of layering, positioning, and improvisation to survive the long nights. Bedding, clothing, and even animals became indispensable tools in the battle against freezing temperatures. Beds themselves were relatively simple. In most homes, they consisted of wooden frames supporting straw-stuffed mattresses. Wealthier families could afford feather beds, but these were rare and still offered limited insulation compared to modern bedding. During the blizzard, families often piled multiple layers of blankets and quilts on top of one another, creating a thick, multi-layered cocoon to preserve warmth. Every available item, bedspreads, shawls, spare clothing, was brought into play. Some families even slept with coats, scarves, or woolen outer garments still on, understanding that any barrier between their bodies and the icy air could mean the difference between comfort and frostbite. The layering process became almost ritualistic, with careful placement to ensure the maximum retention of heat. Parents supervised children to make sure blankets covered every limb, tucking edges under mattresses or piling extra padding around small bodies to prevent heat loss. The use of clothing as an additional layer of warmth was a necessity. Nightwear was typically made of flannel or wool materials, chosen for their ability to trap heat. Yet even these were often insufficient against the combined force of freezing temperatures and wind gusts that penetrated walls and windows. Families adapted by wearing multiple layers, undershirts, nightgowns, woolen socks, and even boots remained on while sleeping. Hats and scarves, normally worn outdoors, were sometimes kept on indoors, particularly for children, to prevent heat from escaping through the head and neck. Parents also employed strategic positioning, placing smaller children between adults or older siblings to conserve body heat. This communal approach to warmth was critical during the blizzard, as even a brief lapse in heat retention could result in hypothermia, especially for infants or the elderly. In addition to bedding and clothing, animals played a significant role in household survival. In rural areas, livestock such as dogs, cats, and occasionally chickens or goats were brought indoors. These animals provided much-needed warmth, their body heat supplementing the layers of blankets and clothing that human family members relied upon. Families arranged their beds and sleeping areas strategically, positioning children near animals when possible, both for warmth and companionship. The presence of animals also offered psychological comfort, providing a sense of continuity and normalcy amidst the chaos of the storm. In urban areas, pets such as dogs and cats similarly became integral to household warmth, often sleeping at the foot of beds or curled against family members. Managing these sleeping arrangements required constant vigilance. Families often rotated who slept closest to the stove or who monitored the fire during the night. Adults would wake periodically to stoke the stove, add coal or wood, and adjust bedding as needed. Even small changes in temperature or drafts could make a significant difference in comfort and safety, requiring careful attention throughout the night. The process was far from passive. Sleeping during the blizzard was an active, collaborative effort, with each family member contributing to the maintenance of warmth and security. The psychological aspects of these arrangements were equally important. Sharing close quarters with family members and animals created a sense of communal resilience. Children learned to trust and cooperate, understanding that their warmth depended not only on blankets, but also on the careful attention of parents and siblings. Adults developed strategies for managing resources, from rationing fuel to organizing bedding and clothing to maximize heat retention. This combination of physical and psychological adaptation was a hallmark of survival during the Great Blizzard. Life during the Great Blizzard highlighted both the ingenuity and the resilience of those who endured it. Economic and social status influenced the quality and comfort of these arrangements. Wealthier families often had access to more bedding, heavier quilts, and additional clothing, allowing for somewhat more comfortable nights. Poorer households, however, had to improvise with what they had, repurposing worn clothing, patching old blankets, and layering creatively to survive. Despite these disparities, the underlying principles of warmth and communal effort were universal. Every household, regardless of wealth, faced the same harsh realities of cold, wind, and the need to protect children and vulnerable family members from the elements. The storm also forced improvisation in other areas of household management. Snow could drift through gaps in doors or under poorly sealed windows, creating icy patches on floors or dampening blankets and clothing. Families developed inventive solutions, using furniture to block drafts, layering quilts in doorways, or even shoveling small interior paths to prevent accumulation inside the home. These adaptations required foresight and coordination, turning sleeping arrangements into a carefully managed operation rather than a simple nightly routine. Health considerations were paramount. Hypothermia, frostbite, and respiratory issues were constant threats. Families monitored each other closely, checking for signs of cold-related illness, repositioning children to maintain warmth, and ensuring that the stove remained operational. The presence of animals, while beneficial for warmth, also required attention, as their waste or movement could disrupt sleeping arrangements or create additional hazards. Balancing warmth, safety, and comfort became a nightly challenge, demanding both physical endurance and practical ingenuity. The blizzard's impact on rural households was particularly pronounced. Farms and small towns lacked the infrastructure and resources of larger cities, making survival more dependent on the careful management of bedding, clothing, and animals. Barns and outbuildings were often used to shelter livestock, while portions of these spaces might be incorporated into the home's sleeping arrangements to take advantage of shared heat. Families organized their nights, meticulously planning rotations for tending fires, feeding animals, and monitoring children. Every member of the household played a role in ensuring that warmth was maintained and that the family survived the relentless storm in urban households. The challenges were slightly different, but equally severe. Apartments and row houses were often poorly insulated, with thin walls and drafty windows. Families relied heavily on stoves and shared body heat, improvising wherever possible. Pets became crucial companions, not only for warmth, but also for emotional support during the long, oppressive nights. parents developed elaborate systems for managing the limited space, sometimes moving bedding between rooms or rearranging furniture to block drafts. The blizzard transformed the concept of sleep from a private, restful activity into a highly coordinated communal effort, demanding attention and care throughout the night. In addition to physical and logistical challenges, there was a profound emotional dimension to these sleeping arrangements. The blizzard created an environment of heightened awareness and shared vulnerability. Families bonded through necessity, with cooperation and vigilance reinforcing emotional connections. Children learned resilience and the importance of mutual support, while adults honed problem-solving skills under pressure. The shared experience of enduring extreme cold, rationing resources, and protecting one another created lasting memories and shaped cultural narratives about winter storms, survival, and family unity. Beyond the immediate household, the presence of animals, bedding, and layered clothing had broader implications for community survival. Families shared resources with neighbors, lending quilts, blankets, or extra bedding to those in need. Pets and livestock were sometimes communal, with neighbors assisting in caring for animals or providing shelter. These networks of mutual aid became critical in sustaining families through the storm, highlighting the interplay between individual household strategies and broader social cooperation. The management of warmth through bedding, clothing, and animals was both a personal and communal endeavor, demonstrating the adaptability and ingenuity of communities facing extreme weather. Over the course of several days, the blizzard forced continuous adaptation. As snow piled higher, temperatures remained low, and winds raged relentlessly. Families refined their strategies for maintaining warmth. They experimented with bedding arrangements, clothing combinations, and positioning of animals to optimize heat retention. Fires were tended with extreme care, and shifts in sleeping patterns were adjusted to match available warmth. The iterative nature of these adjustments reflected a deep understanding of environmental conditions and human physiology, knowledge honed through necessity and experience. Sleeping arrangements became a living, dynamic system, constantly evolving to meet the demands of survival. In summary, the Great Blizzard transformed the seemingly simple acts of sleeping, dressing, and caring for animals into complex survival strategies. Families relied on layered bedding, multiple layers of clothing, and the warmth of pets or livestock to endure bitter cold. Homes were adapted to block drafts, conserve heat, and provide safe sleeping spaces. These arrangements demanded constant attention, coordination, and vigilance, blending physical necessity with emotional resilience and ingenuity. The storm highlighted both the fragility and strength of human adaptation, illustrating how families across urban and rural settings relied on resourcefulness, cooperation, and determination to survive one of the harshest winter events in American history as the Great Blizzard raged through the northeastern United States. Nighttime brought with it a new set of challenges for families struggling to survive. The storm was relentless, its howling winds and blinding snow transforming the familiar world into a frozen, unrecognizable landscape, while the daytime brought its own hardships, shoveling snow, tending fires, and fetching provisions. Night presented a more insidious threat. Darkness amplified the storm's presence, and the cold became sharper, more penetrating, testing the endurance of both adults and children alike. Sleeping during these nights was far from Sleeping during these nights was far from ordinary. It required constant vigilance, careful planning, and unwavering attention to the needs of every household member. Inside homes, the blizzard forced families to adapt in ways that would seem extraordinary to modern observers. Poor insulation meant that heat from stoves and fireplaces could only reach a portion of the house, leaving other rooms bitterly cold. Drafts sneaked through cracks in windows, doors, and walls, bringing icy gusts into sleeping quarters. Families responded by rearranging furniture to block these drafts, piling extra blankets and quilts around beds, and ensuring that children slept close to the warmth of parents or older siblings. The positioning of beds was strategic, designed not only for comfort but for survival. In many households, the living room or kitchen, the room with the stove, became the central sleeping area, while less used rooms were repurposed as storage for extra bedding, coats, and supplies. Children's safety became a paramount concern. During these nights, hypothermia and frostbite were very real threats, particularly for younger children, whose smaller bodies lost heat more quickly. Parents took extraordinary precautions, tucking children tightly in blankets and quilts, ensuring that every extremity was covered, and sometimes placing multiple layers of clothing, even shoes and hats, to conserve warmth. Older children were positioned strategically between adults, receiving protection from both sides, while infants might be nestled directly against a parent's chest to benefit from body heat. This close physical contact served a dual purpose. It provided warmth and also offered reassurance and comfort in a frightening and unpredictable environment. In rural households, the challenges were compounded by the presence of livestock and the architecture of farmhouses. Animals were sometimes brought indoors to provide additional heat, and families arranged their sleeping areas around these animals to take advantage of the warmth they radiated. Barns and outbuildings were sometimes connected to the home, allowing families to monitor animals while also benefiting from their heat. Sleeping in these conditions required careful coordination. Adults often took turns tending fires, feeding animals, or adjusting bedding, while children remained in designated sleeping areas. Even small lapses in attention could have severe consequences, as a fire that burned too low, a draft that went unchecked, or a child who was inadequately covered could lead to dangerous exposure. Nighttime also introduced psychological challenges. The sound of the wind howling against walls, rattling windows, and whipping through the trees created a sense of constant threat. Darkness amplified this tension, making every creak, groan, or sudden noise a potential danger. Children especially were sensitive to these sounds, and parents often had to soothe fears while simultaneously managing practical concerns like firewood, stove maintenance, and blanket adjustments. The emotional labor of keeping children calm and reassured added to the physical strain of maintaining warmth and safety, making nighttime one of the most challenging periods of the blizzard. Snowdrifts inside homes were another hazard. Despite best efforts to block drafts, wind-driven snow sometimes seeped under doors or through cracks in walls, accumulating on floors or dampening bedding and clothing. Families furniture, extra bedding, or even sacks of grain to create barriers and prevent snow from encroaching into sleeping areas. In some cases, Makeshift pathways were shoveled inside homes to maintain mobility and access to essential areas like stoves, water, and food. These adaptations required constant vigilance as the storm's force was unrelenting and conditions could change rapidly throughout the night. Urban households faced their own unique nighttime challenges. Apartments and row houses, often poorly insulated, experienced similar issues with drafts, cold floors, and limited stove coverage. Families relied heavily on shared body heat, layering blankets, clothing, and sometimes pets to retain warmth. Windows were covered with heavy curtains, quilts, or even spare clothing to block the wind, and furniture was rearranged strategically to create microenvironments of warmth. In multifamily buildings, neighbors sometimes collaborated, firewood or blankets, or offering advice and assistance to those most vulnerable. The communal nature of urban survival emphasized both the resourcefulness and the social cohesion required to endure such extreme conditions. Sleep itself during the blizzard was fragmented and fitful. Adults and children alike experienced interrupted rest, waking periodically to tend fires, adjust blankets, check on one another, or respond to sudden drafts or the intrusion of snow. The rhythm of the night was dictated by the storm rather than by natural cycles of rest, creating a unique pattern of wakefulness and sleep that prioritized survival over comfort. Parents often stayed partially awake, listening for signs of trouble, while older children might sleep lightly, alert to the needs. Even moments of rest were shadowed by awareness of danger, turning the act of sleeping into a vigilant, active process rather than a period of passive relaxation. The blizzard also highlighted the ingenuity of families in creating safe sleeping arrangements under extreme conditions. Blankets and quilts were layered with precision. Beds were positioned to take advantage of the stove's heat, and clothing was worn strategically to maximize warmth. Families developed routines for nighttime monitoring, ensuring that someone was always awake or semi-awake to tend fires, feed animals, or check on children. Older siblings were often tasked with helping maintain order, providing additional oversight and protection for younger children. These strategies reflect a deep understanding of both environmental conditions and human physiology, learned through necessity and refined over the course of the storm. In addition to physical survival, emotional resilience was critical. Nighttime was a period of heightened fear and anxiety, particularly for children. The storm's relentless noise, the unfamiliar appearance of snowdrifts pressing against windows, and the isolation created by impassable streets combined to create a sense of vulnerability. Parents provided reassurance through physical closeness, gentle voices, and structured routines. The act of comforting children while simultaneously managing practical challenges required immense patience, attention, and care. This emotional labor was as essential as the physical strategies employed to maintain warmth and safety. Medical concerns also loomed large during these nights. Exposure to cold, combined with limited access to medical care due to impassable streets and paralyzed transport systems, heightened the risk of illness or injury. Families monitored one another for signs of frostbite, hypothermia, or respiratory distress, taking preventive measures whenever possible. Children were particularly vulnerable, and adults prioritized their safety, sometimes sacrificing personal comfort or rest to ensure that the youngest members of the household were protected. This vigilance extended through the night, emphasizing the delicate balance between survival and rest that defined the family experience during the blizzard. Social and economic factors played a significant role in determining the quality of nighttime arrangements. Wealthier families often had larger homes, multiple stoves, and more abundant bedding, allowing for somewhat greater comfort and security. Poorer households faced heightened challenges, relying on improvised bedding, repurposed clothing, and communal warmth to survive. Yet, across social and economic divides, the underlying principles were consistent. Close quarters, shared warmth, vigilant monitoring, and strategic positioning were essential to surviving the night. The blizzard created a common experience of vulnerability, fostering empathy, cooperation, and communal effort within and between households. As the storm progressed, families adapted their nighttime routines in response to changing conditions. Snow accumulation, shifting winds, and fluctuating temperatures required continuous adjustment. Bedding arrangements were reevaluated, clothing layers altered, and sleeping positions changed to maximize warmth. Adults took turns monitoring stoves, checking children, and adjusting barriers against drafts or snow intrusion. This iterative process demonstrated both the adaptability and resourcefulness of families facing extreme weather, highlighting the complex interplay between environmental forces and human ingenuity. The impact on children extended beyond immediate physical survival. The experience of enduring the blizzard, witnessing the vigilance and resourcefulness of their parents, and participating in communal survival strategies left lasting impressions. Children developed early lessons in resilience, cooperation, and problem-solving, while also forming emotional bonds strengthened by shared adversity. The blizzard's challenges created a unique educational environment where survival skills, social cooperation, and emotional fortitude were learned in real time, embedded in the intimate context of family life. By the time the blizzard subsided, the nights had left a profound mark on households and communities. Families had endured extreme conditions, navigating physical, emotional, and logistical challenges with remarkable ingenuity. Children had been protected, nurtured, and educated in the school of survival. Homes had been adapted to serve as havens of warmth and security, demonstrating both the fragility and resilience of human habitation in the face of natural disaster. The lessons of these nights resonated for years, shaping the placement of bedding and clothing continued to be crucial. Families emerged from layered blankets and quilts, often still fully clothed from the previous night, and worked quickly to maximize warmth as they prepared for the day. Children were gathered and assessed for signs of frostbite or lingering cold, and adults ensured that everyone had sufficient clothing and coverings before venturing beyond the immediate household. The landscape outside presented both awe and challenge. Snowdrifts reached unprecedented heights, some taller than fences, street lamps, or even single-story buildings. Familiar streets and pathways were entirely obliterated, leaving neighbors and families disoriented. Urban areas were particularly affected. Sidewalks, streets, and trolley tracks were buried under multiple feet of snow, immobilizing travel and making movement treacherous. Rural families faced similarly daunting conditions, with farm paths blocked, livestock confined, and essential supplies inaccessible. The visual transformation was profound. Homes appeared partially buried, fences disappeared under drifts, and trees bowed under the weight of accumulated snow and ice. To many, the world outside seemed a lean, frozen landscape that demanded both caution and ingenuity. Recovery routines began almost immediately. Families set about clearing snow from entrances, paths, and areas surrounding their homes to restore access and mobility. In urban neighborhoods, communal effort became essential as no single family could manage the massive accumulation of snow alone. Neighbors worked together to dig pathways, clear shared streets, and help one another reach stoves or essential supplies. In rural areas, the tasks were equally demanding. Families cleared paths to barns, outbuildings, and roads, ensuring that livestock could be tended and that essential chores could resume. Every action was guided by necessity, as failure to restore access or maintain warmth could have dire consequences in the freezing temperatures. Food and water were immediate priorities. Urban families, often dependent on local markets for daily provisions, faced shortages as supply chains were disrupted. Milk, bread, and other perishable goods were either inaccessible or had spoiled due to prolonged powerlessness in iceboxes or pantries. Rural families, while sometimes more self-sufficient, still confronted obstacles: frozen wells or rivers, inaccessible barns, and snow-blocked paths made gathering and preparing food arduous. Cooking fires had to be maintained continuously, with adults rationing fuel carefully to ensure that meals could be prepared without exhausting supplies. Children participated where possible, fetching water, assisting with firewood, or helping with food preparation, learning firsthand labor-intensive nature of survival in extreme conditions. The morning also demanded reassessment of indoor spaces. Snow intrusion from drafts or partially open windows was common, leaving some areas damp or icy. Families rearranged furniture to block these intrusions, adjusted bedding and clothing, and created additional layers of warmth where necessary. In homes that had been partially compromised by wind or snow, structural improvisation was sometimes required, with furniture, quilts, or other materials used to create barriers or insulate living spaces. This constant attention to the home's microclimate was crucial, as exposure to cold for even brief periods could result in hypothermia or illness. Children's safety remained a paramount concern in the morning hours. Adults assessed each child for signs of fatigue, frostbite, or illness, ensuring that warmth, nourishment, and comfort were prioritized before other tasks. Older children helped care for younger siblings, assisting with clothing, blankets, and feeding, reflecting the collaborative nature of family survival during this extreme event. The communal and cooperative approach within households extended beyond the immediate family to neighbors, friends, and the broader community, highlighting the interconnectedness of survival strategies during the blizzard. As families emerged from their homes into the frozen landscape, the practical challenges multiplied. Streets and paths remained obstructed, making even short trips perilous. Urban families struggled to navigate streets buried under multiple feet of snow, with horse-drawn carriages immobilized and trolley systems paralyzed. Rural families faced blocked roads to neighboring farms, markets, or towns, isolating them for days or even weeks. Those who attempted travel risked being trapped, disoriented, or exposed to the cold, emphasizing the importance of careful planning and strategic action in every movement. Families quickly learned to prioritize essential tasks and defer non-critical activities until conditions improved. The blizzard's aftermath also had social and economic consequences that influenced morning routines and household priorities. Urban families with greater resources could recover more quickly, accessing fuel, food, and labor to clear snow and restore functionality. Poorer households faced more severe constraints, relying on communal support, improvisation, and frugality to manage resources. Rural families, while sometimes more self-sufficient in food production, faced isolation with the inability to transport goods or access emergency assistance. Across all contexts, recovery routines were dictated by a combination of necessity, ingenuity, and the capacity of families and communities to adapt to unprecedented conditions. Health considerations in the morning were critical. Exposure to extreme cold during the night, combined with limited access to medical care, created heightened risks. Families monitored each member for signs of illness, frostbite, or hypothermia, and improvised remedies were often employed to treat minor injuries or symptoms. Children, elderly family members, and those weakened by illness were prioritized, reflecting an acute awareness of vulnerability and the need for careful management of human resources in the household. These health-focused routines were deeply intertwined with logistical considerations, such as maintaining fires, distributing clothing and blankets, and managing the home's microclimate. Psychologically, the morning after the blizzard brought a mix of relief and continuing stress. Families were grateful to have survived the storm, yet faced an immediate reality filled with labor-intensive recovery tasks and ongoing environmental challenges. Children processed the events in a mixture of awe and fear, observing the transformed landscape, the efforts of parents and older siblings, and the resilience required to navigate daily life. Adults carried the emotional weight of responsibility, balancing practical problem-solving with the need to provide reassurance, maintain morale, and ensure safety. The interplay of physical, emotional, and psychological demands shaped the experience of waking in the blizzard's aftermath, highlighting the multifaceted nature of survival. Adaptation strategies developed during the storm extended into the morning routines. Families refined their approaches to heating, sleeping, and clothing based on the lessons of the previous nights. Stoves were maintained continuously, bedding arrangements adjusted for maximum efficiency, and clothing layers optimized for both indoor and outdoor activity. Children participated actively in these routines, learning early lessons in resource management, cooperation, and resilience. The iterative process of adaptation reflected both immediate necessity and long-term learning, shaping family practices that would influence winter preparedness for years to come. The morning also highlighted the importance of community networks. Neighbors collaborated to clear snow, share fuel, and assist vulnerable households. Urban families relied on communal labor to open streets and restore access to markets and essential services. Rural communities coordinated to ensure that isolated households received assistance and that livestock and resources were managed effectively. These cooperative efforts demonstrated the interconnectedness of survival strategies and the role of social cohesion in navigating extreme environmental events. Families' recovery routines were inseparable from broader community actions, emphasizing the collective dimension of survival during the blizzard. As the day progressed, families balanced immediate survival needs with the slow process of restoring normalcy. Children returned to basic routines as far as possibly including meals, chores, and learning activities, though these were constrained by ongoing environmental challenges. Adults managed both household labor and community coordination paths, tending fires, and organizing resources. The rhythm of the day was dictated by both necessity and opportunity, with every action calibrated to maximize warmth, safety, and resource efficiency. Even mundane activities such as eating, fetching water, or moving through the home required careful planning and vigilance. The aftermath also had long-term implications for household management and winter preparedness. Families incorporated lessons learned during the blizzard into future practices, including the strategic layering of bedding, the use of clothing for warmth, the positioning of stoves, and the management of fuel and food supplies. Communities developed more structured approaches to cooperative labor, sharing of resources, and the experience of waking in the blizzard's aftermath shaped both individual and collective memory, embedding knowledge, strategies, and cultural narratives that would persist for generations. In summary, the morning after the Great Blizzard was a period of intense labor, careful adaptation, and emotional resilience. Families emerged from nights of vigilant survival to face a transformed landscape, blocked streets, and ongoing environmental